been knowing about Matt since his days at Towson University. I think he started with the White Student Union or something like that.
I remember the article where they asked you about me, actually, and so that was probably 7 years ago. So I was familiar with your work, even I think before I'd seen documentaries, before I even got into white nationalism, with your work in the Klan. So it's one of those weird things where it's like, I feel like, I don't know, we kind of have at least known of each other for much longer, so it doesn't exactly feel like a first meeting to me, if that makes sense. And it's kind of cool though, you know. Well, and that's actually I think the most important thing, that before I was in the movement, while I was in the movement, and being out of the movement, my opinion of Daryl hasn't changed. Because like the number one thing that always got me, you know, people would think like in the movement, like, well, he's getting people out and stuff like that. And it's like the humanizing of people that you fundamentally disagree with. Because I mean, you've spent a lot of years working not just with white nationalists or separatists, but actual white supremacists, don't like anyone who's different from them, like hate-driven individuals, and there's a huge spectrum. But you've gone after people that are white supremacists, and you've treated them like people, and you've been able to open those doors of conversations and like to move those people out. I don't see any politician, any expert, any person on a speaking circuit, anything like that, outside of you, who has actually decided the number one way to reach people and change hearts and minds is by treating them like people. And you've been consistent about that for longer than I've been alive. So you've been doing this for a long time, and you have the results to show it.
Now you make me sound old.
No,
Yeah, we're giving you a hell of a time with the dark as the age. Honestly, I think we better just leave.
Well, I just think it's incredibly impressive. Like when you've got, I mean, it's over like 200 Klan robes and things like that that people have given you as they've left the movement. Your work has shown results year after year after year, treating people like people, humanizing them, and working with them where they're at, versus people throwing bricks at them or saying that they're trash. And you know, when you kick people when they're down, it further radicalizes them, hardens them. And like you've been consistent, and I think that deserves respect. Even when I was in the movement, I was like, this is the only guy in the American culture that seems to actually, if we were to sit down and have coffee 5 years ago, you would treat me like a person.
Absolutely.
And that's, no one else is doing that. So I mean, I guess I would be kind of curious, like, why do you think that is? That you're so unique and no one else has followed this example of what works?
I think that because of my background growing up, my parents were U.S. Foreign Service, and so I grew up as an American Embassy brat and lived overseas. I'm 62 years old now, and starting in 1961, at the age of 3, we started going overseas. You go to a country for 2 years, and then you come back home here to the States, you're here for a little while, and you go to another country for 2 years, back and forth, back and forth. And when I was overseas in the 60s, like in elementary school, stuff like that, my classes were full of kids from all over the world, because all the embassies that had an embassy in those countries, all of their kids went to the same school. So my classroom was like multicultural, and that word didn't even exist back then. But to me, it was the norm. You know, this kid is from Nigeria, this kid right here is from Japan, she's from France, she's from Spain, or whatever. And that's how I grew up. And today, as a professional musician, I perform all over the world. So when you combine my travels as a kid with my travels as an adult, I've been now in 57 different countries on 6 continents. And I lived in Africa. I lived in Africa for 10 years. I lived in Europe as part of my dad's assignment and stuff. And no matter how far I've gone, no matter how far I've gone from the U.S. to the other side of the earth, and seen as many different colors, ethnicities, cultures, traditions, when I get home, I've concluded that we all are human beings, and we all want the same things. We want to be loved, we want to be heard, we want to be respected, you know, and we want the same things for our families as they want for theirs. So, you know, they might have a different way of going about it, or what they say, what they do, how they live, but at the end of the day, those fundamental things are common to all of us. And one of my favorite quotes of all time is by Mark Twain, and it's called The Travel Quote. And Mark Twain, Freudian slip. Okay, so Mark Twain said, Travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness, and many of our people need it sorely on these accounts. Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all one's lifetime. And that's so true. So, to answer your question, if I had not had that upbringing, and my first experiences with white people, were racist or something like that, would I be doing this today? There's a possibility, maybe not. But I've seen people, white people from all over the world, my fellow Americans from the embassy, of course, and my French friends, my German friends, my Australian friends as a little kid, and we all got along fine. Maybe we didn't speak the same language, but we played together, went to school together, we had slumber parties together. So I could not understand, to save my life, when I would come back home here, and people who looked like my white friends would treat me differently. All because of the color of my skin. It just made no sense to me whatsoever. I could not wrap my head around it. And so that's what got me into this. I got a vast library on black supremacy, white supremacy, anti-Semitism, Ku Klux Klan, the Nazis in Germany, the neo-Nazis over here, trying to find out the answer. And none of those books really gave me a satisfactory answer. So I figured, okay, why not go to the source? And I happened to have met a Klansman in a bar one night on a gig. And he liked my music and invited me to sit with him, which I did. And I thought, this is kind of odd because I read all these books in the Klan, and this guy is not fitting what I know about the Klan.
Right.
He came up to me and put his arm around my shoulder and wanted to buy me a drink, and thought I played the piano like Jerry Lee Lewis, and wanted to know how does that happen as a black man to do that. And I explained to him that
It's a little bit of history.
I had to let him know, Jerry Lee got that from black people. But he was very friendly, and I took advantage of that. Not immediately because it didn't dawn on me. But later on, I thought, damn, Daryl, the answer fell right into your lap. Who better to ask than someone who would go so far as to join an organization over 100 years old that has a history of violence and hatred and discrimination against people like me. Get back in contact with that guy who was so friendly with you and get him to fix you up with the Klan leader here in the state of Maryland. Interview that guy and then move up north, go down south, move to the Midwest, West, and interview other leaders and members and get those answers and write a book. Because my book would be the first book written by a black author on the Ku Klux Klan from the perspective of sitting down face-to-face interview with them. There have been two other books written by black authors that dealt with the Klan, but each one talked about how he escaped the lynching, one in the 1930s and one in the 1940s, but not from the perspective of talking face-to-face with their would-be lynchers. So I wanted that experience, of course, with all those crazy. But there's the book.
Well, and like that, I find that really fascinating. There we go. Sorry, I didn't mean that. But like, I find that fascinating in a lot of things because, talking about people like calling me crazy for the idea of like going to sit down with Klansmen, and like I can remember like being in the movement when I had met a member of the Nation of Islam in Ohio, and they had invited me and another friend of mine, why don't you come out and it was a really rough neighborhood where I obviously stood out, right? People are looking at me like, he doesn't look like a cop, he's too fat to be a cop, like what's he doing, and the Nation of Islam guys, were welcoming, they brought us in, and people had told me in the movement, they were like, you're going to go and you're going to sit down with black separatists, and you're going to go on their turf,
Get yourself killed.
yeah, without a gun, you're just going to waltz in, and everything was great. And it was so bizarre to me that there were the preconceived notions, and of course, like, groups like the Nation of Islam are different than, say, just going to meet, like, an average black person. I mean, whatever the Klan is different. But there's these preconceived notions that exist, I think, in mainstream society, but then also in different political movements and stuff like that, where you assume that most people aren't being driven by the same things like you mentioned, of caring about their families, of wanting to be able to have a better life for their kids and stuff like that. And you assume people are fundamentally way different than you are, driven by forces you can't comprehend. But over and over, I had these experiences, even meeting like and all sorts of stuff, but you get to meet their kids, and you go to a park, and then you have a cup of coffee, and you realize, like, you're being driven by the same things, fundamentally, deep down, that are driving me. There is that, like, shared human experience, not to sound too cliched, but I found it over and over and over again that when you give most people a chance, you realize that we're being driven by the same forces, and we really are fundamentally similar, even if we have different backgrounds.
I agree 100%. You know, and I never set out to convert anybody in the Klan. I mean, when you see my name with the media or something like that, you know, it's just a black musician converts and some amount of Klansmen. No, I never converted them. You know, I didn't even convert one. They converted themselves. I was simply the impetus, you know, that led them to come to the conclusion, hey, I need to change my direction here, something like that. Because, I mean, I know when I say, hey, you know, you need to get out of this organization, give me your road, blah, blah, blah. It wasn't like that. Because how it first started for me was, I never thought I was going to become friends with somebody in the Klan. I mean, you know, from all you talk about preconceived notions, right? You know, we all have heard the expressions as kids growing up. A tiger does not change its stripes. A leopard does not change its spots. So why would I think that a Klansman would change his robe and hood? You know, it just doesn't happen. You might talk to me, but you don't like change. And all I wanted to know was from them was, how can you hate me? You don't even know me. All you see is my skin color, and you make all these assertions. And the difference between how I approach them and how I've seen other people approach them, you know, if they don't like somebody, and you come into a room with them, their wall is up. You know, they're ready, you know, to defend themselves and attack you or whatever, because you are their nemesis. So I realize I'm meeting my nemesis, or they're meeting their nemesis, whatever. However, you know, when I ask them, you know, they tell me things like, well, Mr. Davis, you know, black people are prone to crime. You know, you all are criminals. Well, why do you say that? Well, Mr. Davis, all you have to do is look at the prison system. There are more blacks in prison, you know, than there are whites. You know, you can see that, right? So, you know, that's a half-truth. You know, there are more blacks in prison than there are white people. But they're not taking into consideration the inequity of the judicial system and the fact that even black people or white people, whether they're innocent or guilty, if they're poor, they cannot afford adequate representation, and so they're forced to take some plea deal, something that they didn't even do, and there they are. Okay? But what they see, one's perspective is one's reality, right? So they see more black people in prison, therefore that fits my narrative. That's more criminal prone. And then I'm told that black people are inherently lazy, and we prefer to scam the government welfare system rather than work. And then I was told this book had come out. This is around the first time of my interview, called The Bell Curve. Okay. And, black people, Mr. Davis, are born with a smaller brain than white people. And so, therefore, the capacity for intelligence is less. You know, the bigger the brain, the more intelligence. That's how they correlated it to me. And so I'm sitting there, as close as Matt and I are right now over a little table, listening. And I didn't push back. Okay? I let them get it all out. Now, most people would find what this person is saying to be offensive. Calling me a criminal, I'm on welfare, my brain is small.
Just throw the cards.
You know, and I mean, sure, what the person is saying is offensive, but I was not offended. And why was I not offended? Because I know who I am. I just met this person 5-10 minutes ago. So why should I be offended by a lie? You know, I know who I am. This person cannot offend me. So if my mother or dad were to tell me, you know, you're not telling me you got a small brain or blah, 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 I might have, a little more concern, right?
Some sort of complex.
Yeah, but somebody who doesn't even know me, and they make this, this assertion based on the color of my skin, why should I be offended by an untruth? But see, most people would be, and they'd be pushed back immediately, and maybe even, reaching across and hitting the person. So that shuts down the whole conversation. Right? So I said, you know what? Let it get it all out, and that's what he needs to do. And so when they finish, now they're not used to being able to get that far in a conversation with somebody they don't like without some pushback. Right? It's not that I'm kissing their butt. I'm just listening. I'm trying to learn from them, what the beef is. So then when they finish, I tell them, well, listen, I don't have a criminal record. I just defend it myself. So that way it keeps the wall down. And then I'm able to plant a seed because they feel somewhat compelled to listen to me because I sat there and listened to their diatribe about how bad I am, and now they're going to listen to me. So that wall is down, I plant the seed. But the important thing is you've got to come back and water that seed and nurture it so that it grows. So, and the only way you can come back is to have credibility, to be transparent. Right now, they may not like me because I'm black or whatever, but they respect me because I allow them to be heard. I give them that platform. Plus, I know a lot about the Klan. I've been reading about it, studying it since I was a kid. I know secret passwords. I know what the colors in the robes mean. I know, their little oaths and all that kind of stuff. And so they're like, how does this guy know this? So now they're curious, and the respect goes up. I mean, I've even had Klansmen contact me to help them with their Klan craft when they're moving up from Exalted Cyclops to Great Titan, because the guy didn't know. Just, so they had to ask me. So I know as much, if not more, than some of them. And
Probably most of them.
and that raises, their respect meter for me. So now I'm allowed to come back. And so, you start off like this as adversaries. But I give them the platform, I know some of their stuff, and now the gap is closing. So but when you get about here, you have formed a relationship. And you keep on talking, keep coming back, talking, and you're getting closer. By the time you get here, you're heading towards a friendship. You're humanizing one another. You may still believe in different ideologies, but you're heading towards a friendship. All right? And you find that you have more in common than you do in contrast. And then, the trivial things like skin color, or whether you go to a church, a synagogue, a mosque, or a temple begin to matter less and less. And I've seen this time and time again. They'll go home and they will think about, just like we all do at the end of the day, we review what we did throughout the day. And think, I just spent 3 hours talking with a black man and we didn't fight. And I said all these things to him, he didn't get pissed. And they have to think about that. And now that their wall is down, they're hearing what I'm saying. And they're reviewing it, and they're thinking, what he said about such and such is right. But he's black. But it was right. But he's black. So you got this cognitive dissonance thing going on, right? And that goes on for a while. And then they have to come to the conclusion, because it's their dilemma, not mine. Because I know who I am, but now they're trying to figure out who they are. So they figure, okay, do I disregard the fact that he's black and believe the truth that he told me? Because it is true. Or do I continue living a lie? That's their dilemma. And that's how that change occurs. I don't change them. They do themselves. I just give them the information that they need.
Makes a lot of sense. But again, it opens up relationships.
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing that I feel like that isn't even part of the conversation here in the United States when it comes to the political divide. I mean, whether it's Republicans or Democrats or across color lines or religious lines and things like that, the idea of having the audacity to actually build relationships with people. Everyone's got an opinion, but a lot of people don't have experiences. Like, I mean, there's sort of similar thing. I got invited one time years ago to go up to Chicago to. Oh, really? Well, great city. But I got invited to go to a TV show they were filming that was on public access of a black supremacist. Not a black separatist, but he was not a big fan of white folks at all. And it was, we filmed for a long time, and it came in, it was very cold because I was the only white guy, and I showed up. And by the time we had finished talking, and we had found common ground on certain issues like income, economic issues, things like that, social values that are family-oriented and things like that. By the end, these people, and there was a good crowd of them, who had started off incredibly cold, obviously not threatening, but hostile, even to like my presence as a white person. By the end, like some of the gals would actually like hug me, and one of them was like, "You're okay for a white boy," and I took that as one of the greatest compliments, like because in that experience, I really feel that it started out with that I was a white devil, that I was there that I hated them
just sit there and wait what they call the canine unit. You gotta wait for 20, 30 minutes for the dog to come. And then everybody get out of the van, that's my van right there. And the dog gets inside the van, runs around under the seats in the back and sniffs all the equipment, the suitcases and whatever, looking for drugs. And then, okay, Mr. Davis, you're free to go. Off we go. I mean, that's happened a bunch of times. Okay? Or if I'm by myself, get pulled over. And when you see these things like George Floyd, like Rodney King, like all these things, when I see the lights in my rearview mirror, I have a different perception than say when you see the lights in your rearview mirror, coming home at night. Okay, maybe we were speeding, maybe we weren't. But the fact is, we're getting pulled over. All right. So if you were to take, let's say, 10 of your white male friends and ask them this question: when you're coming home late at night, maybe from a date or graveyard shift or whatever, and you see those lights on in your mirror, you're going down some rural road, what's the first thing that goes through your mind? I'll guarantee you, probably 10 out of those 10 guys are going to say, white guys, are going to say, I hope I don't get a ticket. I hope my insurance doesn't go up. I hope I don't get points on my license or whatever. You ask that same question to 10 black guys, same scenario, they're going to say, I hope I don't get shot. I hope I don't get beat up. And that's their perception. Not that every cop is going to do that, but that does occur to us because of the history, When I first moved here to Maryland, we moved to Potomac. Okay? And I still have the house over there in Potomac. My dad drove a Mercedes. And he was a high government official. And he was constantly being pulled over. They thought he walked into the neighborhood and drove out. And it was crazy. And my dad was one of the first black Secret Service agents in this country. Yeah, he wanted to be an FBI agent. And the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, was a racist, among other things. And he wasn't hiring women, and he wasn't hiring blacks. But Harry Anslinger, who was the head of the Secret Service, hired 5 black guys at one time. And my dad was one of those 5. And he rose as far as they would let a black person rise. The books written about it, and he was training agents after that were being promoted above him because, there was a ceiling on black promotion. So my dad had a natural knack for languages. I don't know where it came from, but he had a natural, he picked up a book, learned Chinese, he spoke Japanese, he spoke Russian, he spoke all kinds of stuff. 9 languages, he could speak fluently, and he could read and write in 4 of them. And anyway, Richard Nixon, Richard Nixon was vice president to Dwight Eisenhower. And you remember from history, the kitchen debate with Nikita Khrushchev. All right. So the State Department needed some American Russian interpreters to travel with Nixon, because Nixon didn't speak any Russian, to go to Moscow and interpret for this kitchen debate with Nikita Khrushchev, Prime Minister of Russia. So they put out some kind of ad or whatever for any Americans who could speak Russian fluently. My dad applied and got the gig. So my dad went with Nixon to the Soviet Union, Russia, and interpreted for him. And Nixon was so impressed that he spoke to Eisenhower, and they called him into the White House and talked to him. And they told him, you have gone as far as you could go in the Secret Service. But the State Department, the Foreign Service, well, let you go a little higher. He said, you should take the Foreign Service exam. So my dad took the exam and passed it. And joined the Foreign Service. That's how we got to travel, all that kind of stuff. And but the Foreign Service at the time also had a ceiling for black people. It was a little higher than the Secret Service, but it was still a ceiling. But everywhere we went, my dad could communicate with people, and I think that was probably key for me. Being able to talk to people, no matter who they are, where they are, be able to communicate with them, and that lessens any type of friction or fear of one another. Because again, those fundamental things, that we all want, we can't let preconceived notions stand in front of that. And just like, you had the preconceived notions of these guys, these black guys in this all-black neighborhood, you stood out as a sore thumb, and they had this preconceived white devil notion of you, And these things were dispelled by that talking. this country, we spend too much time talking about the other person, or talking at the other person, or talking past the other person. If we just spent some time talking with the other person, that would solve a lot of problems. And I've said it before, that ignorance creates fear. We fear the things that we don't understand. You know, we fear things of which we're ignorant. And without checking that fear, keeping it in check, that fear will escalate and create hatred, which, because we hate the things that frighten us. If we don't keep that hatred in check, the hatred escalates and creates destruction. We want to destroy the things that we hate. Why? Because they frighten us. But at the end of the day, they may have been harmless, we were just ignorant, right? And we practice too much trickle-down solution, which works in certain situations, like, let's say, a corporation or a police department, where if people at the top in management are tight and straight, that trickles down to below, and subordinates are tight and straight. With management screwing up, that trickles down too. They set a bad example, they're going to set a bad example on the street or on the floor or whatever. So we cannot use that trickle-down thing when it comes to racism. I think it's got to trickle up. So in other words, forget about the top, the destruction part. Once something is destroyed, it's not coming back. It's just gone. The next level down would be the hatred. Forget about the hatred. That's just a symptom. Forget about the fear. That's just a symptom. You go to the source, which is ignorance. And if you cure the ignorance, then there's nothing to fear. Right? With nothing to fear, there's nothing to hate. With nothing to hate, there's nothing to destroy. We can cure ignorance. We can cure ignorance through education and exposure. When you got exposed to the Nation of Islam, and they got exposed to you, their perception had to change.
Right.
You got these black women hugging you and stuff.
Totally unexpected at the moment.
Exactly. Okay? Because something was happening. That fear was alleviated. That ignorance was alleviated.
Yeah.
Okay? So the hate was alleviated. They got to know you. They didn't hate you. Right? They were kind of looking at you with an odd eye when you came in, because you represented what they hated, the white devil.
Yeah.
But that exposure and that education for you talking with them, explaining where you're coming from, blah, 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 they realized, you know what? This is exactly where we're coming from, just from a different color or something. So start with the source, ignorance. And that will alleviate a lot of things.
Well, and it's sort of thing in terms of like division, going back. I'm a history nerd. That's the one thing. It's great at cocktail parties. Totally useless when it comes to like getting a job. In terms of unless I want to go be a professor. But like as I've been studying more and more about history and looking back at things like race relations, like ignorance, as you're saying, has been purposely put into both communities of like working, normal, everyday white folks and black folks ever since we teamed up in Bacon's Rebellion, when we realized that indentured servants who were white and slaves who were black, that we were having a really bad time getting exploited and working together, and that really scared the people in power. So that's when we see the beginning of these like racial exclusion laws or anti-miscegenation laws, things like that, to divide based on color, because fundamentally deep down when we got to talk to each other, we got to realize that the different communities actually shared so much in common. So it seems to me that going forward in American history, that ignorance isn't something that just has happened. It's actually been purposely created by the system to divide these different communities, because when we all get to talking, and I had a journalist ask me one time something like, so you think you've got more in common with just every white person than you do a Hispanic father of two that is working just to pay his bills every single day? You're telling me that, whoever, just because they're white, that you guys are more the same on the day-to-day, your concerns, your considerations, what you want for your kids, all that. And I pondered that for a long time, and I realized that, Richard Spencer or Mitt Romney or a banker, just because he's white, our experiences are probably more similar than the lives and the understanding of, a guy like Mitt Romney, right? They're different worlds. And I really think, I guess long story short, is that this ignorance that's been created only can be fought organically because the system has put it in place in the first place to divide people that share things in common. But years at a college.
And I think, we're seeing a lot of that today, where we're seeing more. I mean, white people have always participated in our civil rights movement since the 50s, since Rosa Parks and Dr. King through the 60s. But today we're seeing a mass of white people participating. And I mean, if people want to call it the Black Lives Matter movement, it's not just Black Lives Matter. There are other people there as well who are not involved with Black Lives Matter, who are also just marching for civil rights and things like that. And we're seeing all kinds of people doing that, and that's a collective that is causing people to pull the earplugs out of their ears and listen to the system, because they're seeing people now in that march that look just like that. Whereby before, when they were seeing mostly people who looked like me, they were like this. They didn't want to hear what we had to say. And now I'm not talking about the looters and all those people. Those people are just people who exploit to self-enrich and just join in, at nighttime so they can go bust out windows and rob stores and stuff. White and black. Now, the burning of the buildings, I don't justify it. I don't advocate it. I wouldn't do it myself, but I do understand it. I completely understand it, and I don't fault them. And a lot of people say, well, why do they burn down all these buildings in their own neighborhood? Blah blah blah. Let me try to explain that. If you are driving down the street at 25 miles an hour and you're doing 75 miles an hour, police officer sees you, he's gonna pull you over. He's gonna write you a ticket. Simple as that. You don't pay your bill on time, you get imposed a late fee on top of what you owe. You do something to hurt somebody, and they take you to court and sue you. All these examples have a component of money attached to them. They're trying to separate you from your money, so they hit you in the wallet. And the reason why they impose these money things on you is to curb your behavior. If you get a $200 ticket for doing 35 miles an hour in a 25-mile-an-hour zone, chances are you won't be driving down that street again doing that speed, right? Or you'll pay your bill next time when it's due. You won't knock the guy's teeth out next time, so you don't have to spend $25 grand for a pair of false teeth or something like that, right? So, money talks. Money causes people to behave a certain way. Okay, so then, when they have demanded, hey, I don't want to be treated special. I just want to be treated equal. And you're like this. You don't want to listen to them. The police shut them down. The courts shut them down. So the next best thing to do is do the same thing to them that they did to you. Cost them some money.
Hit them in the wallet.
Yeah, hit them in the wallet. Burn down these buildings. All right, that costs the city millions and millions and millions of dollars. They don't be separated from their money. It also causes the insurance companies to get on board, because insurance companies, as you know, they never want to pay out. All they want to do is collect their premiums, right? And so the insurance companies then get on the police and say, hey, you all got to stop this behavior. You're costing us money. We insured that AutoZone or whatever it was, that got burned down. So they got separated from their money. So now people are getting to listen. And as you see, there's been a ripple effect where the march was primarily geared towards the police, but now there are all kinds of ripple stuff going on. What do you call it? Food brand labels being changed. Confederate flags, statues, Mississippi flag, whatever. None of that is going to change somebody's attitude, taking down statues and taking down flags. But my feeling on that, which I'll get to in a second, is they need to go, but they should not be destroyed. They should be put in a Confederate museum or a Confederate memorial park, something like that. My reason why I said they need to come down is this. Speaking of history, we went to war against Great Britain, right? And we won, which is why we celebrated Japanese Americans here whose ancestors fought under Hirohito when they bombed Japan. These Japanese Americans don't honor their ancestors by building statues to Hirohito or flying the Japanese flag. They're American, and we won. We went to war against Germany, and there are plenty of German Americans here, but we won. So we don't build statues to Hitler or fly the swastika or whatever, even though there are plenty of German Americans here whose ancestry was there under Hitler and the Third Reich. So basically, the loser does not get to build his or her statue or fly their flag on the property of the winner. Now, I'm from Chicago originally because that's where I was born, but my parents are from Virginia, Roanoke and Salem, which Virginia was the seat of the Confederacy, and I am a descendant of slaves. My ancestors fought in the Confederacy because slaves had to fight for their slave masters, right? And fought against, the people in the Union. While I honor my ancestors because without them I wouldn't be here, but I don't honor the Confederacy myself, or the notion of slavery. So I don't fly the Confederate flag, but I say don't destroy those things. They are a part of our history. They should be preserved in a museum. But they shouldn't fly on public buildings at the state capitol of South Carolina or something like that, or be on federal property. No, they lost. That's just my opinion.
Well, and, it's an interesting thing. Kind of go back to what I was talking about before. I mean, obviously, like, I used to be a big Confederate heritage defender. I used to be a member of the Sons of Confederate Veterans. I'm still a reenactor as a hobby.
And there's some blacks in that organization.
There are. Well, it's interesting reenacting, actually. I've come across Confederate reenactors who are black, and, they enjoy the history and the camaraderie and the fraternity they can get in the hobby. But for me, my perception has changed over the past several years, at least partially through talking to people of color, but then also doing research in history and stuff like that, where I came to realize, that the lost cause narrative that the war wasn't about slavery, the war was about states' rights. And then you're like, the states' rights to what? It's like the right to own people, right? Like that was the right we're talking about.
Right.
And, I've realized increasingly, and I've got a Confederate battle flag tattoo on my body that I thought was really cool when I was 18 years old, that the perception of, people like me, working class, normal, white guys that don't have any, my ancestors weren't plantation owners, that sort of thing, that we were duped into fighting that war, because how can you get everyday white people to fight for a system that exploited not just people of color, but also exploited poor white people, because how can you compete with ostensibly free labor, right? I mean, it was bad for everyone, but they were able to bring up this color line argument to say, if you don't support us, then, Nat Turner is going to come and kill your family. Yeah, you've got to go and fight and get your leg blown off at Gettysburg to ensure that another Haiti doesn't happen, and that fear, that ignorance, and those divisions caused that war to happen, where it really was for the benefit of a very small amount of people in the grand scheme of things, but 620,000 people lost their lives, and we're still dealing with repercussions. But I think the history, after the war, developing the lost cause narrative, where they said, it wasn't about slavery.
Right, heritage.
Yeah, it's about heritage. It's about you, John Q, poor white Southerner, that, you're going to get this monument, but the war was never about you or for you in the first place. It was about a system of exploitation, but they created this false narrative to tie, essentially, I think, poor white Southerners into white supremacy. Because you're going to uphold segregation, you're going to uphold these systems because it's heritage, and because you don't want to be at the bottom rung of the society's ladder. So they're able to exploit these differences when, again, your average sharecropper, who was white or black, have more in common in, say, 1920, when they're building all these monuments on courthouses, but they had to create that division, because if they didn't have that, then we might all work together. So, do you think we're at this moment in American society where we actually finally can overcome, where you can be proud of who you are, you can be proud of your ancestors, you can have your heritage. I don't think anyone's asking anyone to give those things up, themselves or anything like that,
Right.
but like when we can actually come together to cause a change in the system. Like, do you think we're at that point, or do you think there's still work to be done?
There's still work to be done, but I think we're coming to that point. And people like you who can get out there, and myself and others who are willing to come out there and educate, educate black people, educate white people, educate American people,
Right.
You should talk both to blacks and whites. I should do the same thing. And others should do the same thing because we are one America. And I think, with those kinds of educational talking points that you don't find in the classroom, in high school, and so forth and so on, like, you're a lot younger than I am, but when I was in high school, I went to Wooten High School.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so we did not have in our history books that we had internment camps in this country for Japanese Americans. I did not learn that until I was in college. I was like, what? Are you kidding me? I didn't believe it at first. Well, why wasn't it in the books? Well, it was one of those shameful things that, we try to put under the carpet, and as a result, it does no good, So the things that we're talking about now, that needs to be in our history books, but it's not. So then it's up to us as organic, as the people, to educate one another.
Because the system's not going to teach
Right.
members of the society truths that would undermine the system.
Right.
They're interested, it seems, more in control more than anything, so that they don't want the populace to be educated.
And that's why the populace has to take it upon themselves to do that.
I think you're right. And that's the hard thing, because it's really easy to kick the can down the road to say, oh, we'll have a new program, or we'll have a new initiative, or something like that. But it seems like if we're going to want any change long term, it's going to take a lot of grassroots organizing. And that's the only way it can be done. Because any other option is just going to be, kind of corporate approved, government approved, and it never will change anything. And I think, like, as Malcolm X said, like, when he was talking about change, he said, that the system will give us essentially like lip service and make small cosmetic changes, but they'll never make any systemic changes. They'll just try and like buy off like the black community talking 50 years ago. And I think about that now. No one's talking about abolishing private prisons. No one's talking about, I read about the new Jim Crow, the prison industrial complex. Like, the people are talking about these issues, but the politicians are saying, let's change a label or let's change a name, but they're not talking about changing the systems. We have the biggest prison population on the planet. China has 4 times as many people as us, and we have got, and other countries that have lots more citizens, by hundreds of millions, we've got the largest prison population on the planet, but they want to talk about, little things instead of talking about systems of oppression, and we're the only ones who can bring that up.
And the highest recidivism rate in this country, in any country. And another thing is population control, which people don't talk about. When I was a kid, black people made up 12% of the population. Native Americans were just under 1%, just say 1%. Hispanics, Latinos were like 2 and 3%, and Asians were 4%, while white people were like 84, 86%. And so white people of the supremacist mindset, their biggest nemesis were black people at 12%. They didn't care anything about Native Americans. The attitude was just put them on a reservation, forget about them, and we got to deal with these black people at 12%. So today, in 2020, black people remain at 12%, right? And Native Americans remain at 1%. Asians have gone to 6%, and Hispanics have gone to 17%. All right, so if you just take 12% black, 17% Hispanic, that right there is 29% non-white. So a lot of them are seeing this kind of thing happen, and they predict by 2042 that it's going to be 50-50, right? And that's why I think we're seeing a lot of that, a lot of recruitment into some of these groups. Come join us and we're going to take our country back. We're going to build that wall. We're going to do this and do that. And fear-mongering. While there are a lot of people who embrace that change, there are plenty who don't embrace that change. Because, when you sit on the throne of power for 400 years, you don't want to get off. It's like, as a musician, if I had a #1 hit on the charts, I don't want to see it go down to, top 100 and then fall concern of people who have that paranoia mindset. And the way to address it is to get to know one another and stop all this fear and have these organic groups come together and talk with one another. The organic organizing that you're talking about amongst people, the populace, does work. And, like him or not, that's how Obama got in office, as a grassroots thing, It worked. So it can work. I think he did some good things. I think there was a lot more he could have done that he didn't do. But that's any president. There's no one that fits all. But his strategy worked that got him in office. And that same strategy, if we study it, we can apply it to this situation. And I think and shape, where this country is going.
Well, I think a lot, I think about the system had to get rid of Dr. King. A lot of people at the same time. When Dr. King was doing the Poor People's Campaign, and again pushing this idea that his civil rights were advancing, to then talk about to poor whites that your situation is the same fundamentally as the exploited black population, and let's unite people across color lines, across regional lines. It wasn't just going to be based in the South or the rural areas of the cities, but to get the poor people together, get working people together, to realize together there's way more of us than there are the people in power. And I think that's why the system had to remove, like the assassination of Fred Hampton.
Right.
They've removed a lot of people that were able to create and push this idea of we're all in this together across these lines. And as that was coming together, then the government had to remove them. But we're at this moment, I think, where it's not just one person, one representative, but people can come together across color lines to realize that there are more of us.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. Keep us divided, and conquer, while they do their thing at the top.
Yeah.
And we got Martin Luther King Day, and you realize we had to fight for decades to get him honored like that, because everybody refused. I think Arizona was the last state to approve it. But we fought hard, and nobody wanted to give him the day. But you realize he has a day now. Martin Luther King is the only American man the only American man who has a holiday all to himself. And guess what? He's black. And that does not go well with the system. All right? There used to be two white guys who each had a holiday to themselves. One was George Washington, and one was Abraham Lincoln. I remember that. We had George Washington Day, we had Abraham Lincoln Day. And they figured, we got too many holidays. Let's just combine them. And now we got President's Day. So it's two white guys on one day. This black man has a holiday all to himself. No other white American has that. So that's trouble for some people. Yet, there is a man who has a holiday all to himself, but according to history, this guy was a murderer, a rapist, and a pillager. And how did he discover something when he got here? People were already here. So we're talking about Christopher Columbus, right? But we give him a holiday to himself, and a man who never murdered, raped, or pillaged any towns, and gave his life to bring everybody together, as you just described, does not get a holiday to himself. It was not a fight. So that's, what we see, that we're up against when we talk about trying to get people together to change this. Because our history books are skewed, the information that we get from the top is skewed, and it's up to people in the know to disseminate this information to others and get the people together.
Well, I think when it comes to holidays and all these discussions, where people are so touchy. With the destruction of statues and things like that, there's a lot of passion on it. There's a lot of justifiable anger. And I think one of the biggest problems that we have is, say you're an Italian American, especially an Italian, Catholic American stuff. I was talking to a member of my family, thank God they actually talk to me nowadays, but about Christopher Columbus, where when they went to Catholic school back in the day, that they were raised with a different notion than protesters are talking about now, right? So we talk about perception. Just watch, if we could watch 15 minutes of Fox News and 15 minutes of MSNBC, and then just use that as people that are in getting a different perception, that's two different Americas. That's two different worlds when you really think about it. Like the information that's put in, and then we sit here and we wonder, like, well, how could this group think of this? How could this group defend that? How could this, when we've created, I think you brought up a really great point, Daryl, of like the information that's being put out that people are consuming, whether it's through media, whether it's through the education system, their own cultural lens, their own experiences, that one of the biggest problems is that we are actually, kind of confusing ourselves and saying, like, we're not even talking. We're not understanding what the other person is actually saying. We're using our preconceived notions to judge and say, like, if you say, like, we need to go to Columbus Day, that means you want to, like, tear down my local Catholic church and you hate Italians. That's not what someone would say.
Right.
And on the flip side, someone would say, oh, like, you like Christopher Columbus, or think Columbus Day should stay. That means that you hate Indians, and you think that we should commit genocide and slavery is okay. And I don't think that's what either side, while there are extremists that exist on all sides and different backgrounds and things like that, that without that communication to break things down, I think most of these fights wouldn't even be fights. I think we could find compromises with understanding and compassion so people wouldn't feel offended. Like we're talking about Confederate statues, like, yeah, that's if you're a black person going to court and the county courthouse has a Confederate flag.
Yeah, I do it all the time.
Yeah, like, I mean, I can't understand that from my perspective because I haven't lived that experience. That's not my history. But to try and put myself for 2 seconds in the shoes of a person of color, like, that's wild to think about. That there's a monument to an institution in a system of human bondage and exploitation, right? As you're going into court, and then we're dealing with the entire court system, as we're talking about the new Jim Crow that exists for poor people. Like, but I think a lot of white people, and then you're talking about different experiences with communities of color, if we don't have that dialogue, if we don't have that understanding, like, I would never have thought of that, honestly, until I started reading some different materials and talking to communities of color, that I felt like tearing down Confederate statues was an attack on me. That was an attack on my heritage, my ancestors had fought. But to think, like, I never considered the black experience and what that would mean to a black person. And once you do, you sit down and you're like, yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, right?
And I know some black people who fly the Confederate flag.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one right here, a good friend of mine, Tony Cohen. You know Tony Cohen?
Not off the top of my head. No.
Okay, he has books from the Button Farm, not too far from Pool Farm, I believe.
Oh.
But he traced the Underground Railroad. Black guy. He is the first black member of Sons of the Confederacy.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. But anyway, I say this: the South has a lot to be proud of. Slavery is not one of them, right? Okay, and that was the battle flag that fought for slavery. And there are people who swear, no, I'm not into racism. I'm not into hate. I want this flag for my heritage. It represents my heritage. Blah blah blah. So what I tell them is this: I say, you know what? I believe you're not a racist, but if you don't think this represents hate that's been co-opted, I want you to come go to a Klan rally with me. And when you see all these people out there with their rose goods, saying, we're gonna ship all the niggers back to Africa and all those other kind of crap that they talk about, and they're flying their Confederate flags, I want you to tell them to give you back your flag, because that is not what it stands for. And I say, if you do that, and I'm serious, if you do that, I will come to your house and I will hoist your Confederate flag up your flagpole for you.
You got to go to their funeral first.